Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to come listen to me talk about allocating your 401k or other retirement funds, picking your 401k funds and how it affects you when you retire. Okay. Got a few disclosures. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and not intended to provide specific financial or tax advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. A good summary of investing history is that stocks pay a fortune in the long run, but seek punitive damages when you try to get paid sooner. This is from Morgan Housel's in his essay, Too Much, Too Soon, Too Fast. Saving for retirement. Many people, they do know that they need to save for retirement. Not as many people know they need to save a long time for retirement. Even fewer are aware of the importance of proper allocation, which is a fancy $10 word for choosing of funds. An improper choice can be disastrous, delaying one's retirement for years, or worse yet, instead of enjoying golden years, muddling through tin or bronze years. Good news is we have decades to save for retirement. The bad news is we have decades to save for retirement, so sometimes folks never get around to it. Basically, the sooner you plant the acorn, the more likely it is you'll have shade in your retirement. Even though it does not require constant attention, it does require periodic attention. It's said the best time to invest was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Unlike planting an acorn, where the early parts of the process may be critical, planting it in the right environment, etc., on whether it survives, starting to invest in your 401k does not have to be perfect initially. Even if you start investing in your 401k and make all the wrong choices initially, it is not a calamity, as long as you correct it within a reasonable period of time. The critical mistake that many people make is to wait until the time is just right to start investing. You may miss out on employer matching funds. This is free money. There's nothing I can offer you that beats free money. You never get around to it, which robs you of years of growth and may minimize your chances of retiring in a time and manner of your choosing. So when you're starting to save for retirement, it's vital to start saving as soon as possible. Ideally, the more you can save, the better, but even smaller amounts with large amounts of time can have dramatic results. It is important to get started as soon as possible, because as I mentioned before, most 401ks, and for those of you in smaller employers, there are simple IRAs out there that also offer matching funds. Matching funds are employer contributions, which after a certain time will belong to you. The question I always ask people that are hesitant to put money into this sort of thing, I say, imagine there's a bank in town, let's just call it the ABC Bank, and they say, hey, come put money in our retirement account, and for every dollar you put in up to a certain amount, we'll add $1. We'll match it. How much would you put in that? Most people raise their hands and say, as much as I could get. I mean, people have opened accounts for far less. They used to open them to get a free toaster. Even if you allocate your funds poorly initially, the effects long-term are not dramatic unless the misallocation is not corrected, or will not be dramatic if the misallocation is corrected in short order. If the misallocation continues as I'm going to illustrate below in some very extreme examples. If it continues uncorrected, it can severely hamper your retirement plans. Fortunately, corrections are easily made. After you take the step of starting to put money in your 401k, it's important to have an unbiased evaluation of what you have and if it matches your long-term goals and your tolerance for risk. A chartered financial consultant, which for instance, I am one of them, can help guide you. So here's our first example. Timid Tim invests in 401k. Timid Tim graduated from college. He got a good paying job at the ABC widget factory. Knowing that one day he'd want to retire, as soon as he was eligible, he signed up for the ABC widget 401k and contributed the amount that would enable him to get all of his employer's matching funds. Here's the problem though. Tim's dad, he made a few bad stock market investments and he always thought the stock market was a total ripoff. So because Tim was raised in that vein, he was scared to death of the stock market. So he elected to put all of his money in the stable value fund in the 401k. It's the so-called safe fund. And if in this hypothetical case, as we're seeing right now with inflation, inflation's a fancy term for your money doesn't buy as much stuff as it used to. Any of us who lived through the late 70s and early 80s remember the Jimmy Carter inflation. And now it looks like it might be back. Every time we go to the gas pump, it hurts. And at the grocery store, you're even seeing it there. And then there's the other extreme. Loyal Larry. Loyal Larry's dad worked for ABC Widget all his life. He was a company man. As such, when Loyal Larry graduated college and got a good paying job at the widget factory, he was a company man too. Again, just like Timid Tim, as soon as he was able to sign up for the ABC Widget 401k, he contributed the amount that would enable him to get all of his employer's matching funds. And he said, yep, I want all ABC Widget stock. Which, if the stock market or if the stock does well, that could be a really good move. However, companies can be doing really well, but there's always times where their stock price takes a hit. Sometimes it's the company's fault. Think Enron, okay? And other times it's totally out of the company's control, like the 2000 and the 2008 downturns in the market. And you just can't control certain things. It's my opinion that no matter how great a company is, owning more than about 5% of your investments in any one company, especially when you can't set stops, basically something that will sell your shares automatically if it drops below a certain price. If you're doing more than 5%, it's a mistake. I have a good friend that retired at a local company back in 1999 when the stock market was near the top, and he had all of his money in company stock. And he retired thinking, because he was a millionaire when he retired, he had over $1 million in company stock. And then 2000 happened. And all of a sudden he went from being a millionaire to a 100,000-aire, not enough to retire. So he ended up having to go back to work. And he wasn't happy about it. So that was, those were examples of two extreme. Now, nobody would really do that, but some people might, but those are extreme examples. Okay, this is what we call the measles chart. It goes back to 1980. If you see down here in the lower left corner, 1980, all the way over here, 2020, basically it's the annual returns and intra-year, which means sometime during the year. Where the index was. In this case, it's illustrating the S&P 500, which is America's 500 largest companies. And these little red dots are the lowest point of the S&P 500 anywhere during that year. Now, for those of us who are older, I remember 1987 really well. Black Monday. You can look it up. It's October, hang on just a second. Yeah, October 19th, 1987. I still remember reading the headlines the next day. The stock market dropped 20% in a day. Okay, now there were some folks panicking then. Matter of fact, at one point during the year, the stock market was down 34%. Okay, but these gray bars up here is where the stock market ended up at the end of the year. Now you might notice if you go from this 34 straight up, if you sat on your hands and done nothing with your money in the S&P 500 in this hypothetical example, you would have been up 2% for the year, despite all the panic. Just because there's a big stock market sell-off doesn't mean you're going to be down for the year. So whenever you're watching the news, just remember two important sayings. One of them is not mine. It's an old adage, but one of the sayings is, if it bleeds, it leads. Basically, bad news people want to see. And one that is a favorite of mine because I think I came up with it. No one tunes into the Weather Channel to watch a sunny day. So just remember, when you're watching the news and they're talking about how the stock market's getting crushed, keep this in perspective. Now, I won't make you count these gray bars, but you'll notice the vast majority of them are actually above this line. So if you count all 42 years, going back to 1980, 32 of them were actually up for the year. Keep in mind, there's going to be years where you're going to lose money, like 2008. At one point, it was down 49%, and it ended the year down 38%. That's why if you're investing money, you need a time horizon on it. Anything in the next 2 to 5 years, I say take it down to the bank, because I got a pretty good idea where the money's going to be in the bank. If you ask me where the stock market's going to be in 2 or 3 or 5 years, I have no idea. And neither does anybody else. I mean, some people have a little bit better, but they can't predict it consistently. Okay, so, all right, now this chart looks complicated, but I'm going to explain it, I promise. Okay, had you put $100,000 in savings accounts based on the average annual percentage on money market accounts from bankrate.com, this is where how much money you would have made. Here looks like somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 3,800 or so, and going on all the way across 2006, 4,500. That's exact. Okay, so if you put 100,000 in, this is how much you would earn. Now you see these little blue bars? They're how much inflation hit you. So right here, you got a blue bar less than 3,000. So you made more in your savings account, in this hypothetical example, then inflation would have ate up. So basically, savings account for these years going through about 2001, you would have made more money in the bank than inflation would have taken away from you and increased costs. Now in 02, 03, 04, you can see savings didn't keep up at all. But back in 05, it's keeping up again, same with 06 and 07. Then in 08, and pretty much since then, if you're putting money in something that's quote unquote safe, inflation is eating away at what you can buy. So if you invest in these safe accounts like Tim and Tim, it can be disastrous long term. Short term, it's probably the right move. Okay, so sometimes folks will come in my office and they'll say, Steve, if I invest, say, $10,000 with you, how much do you expect it to make in the next year? and I'll say somewhere between minus 39% loss, a loss, a big loss, or up to 47%. And they said, well, that's a pretty good range. I said, yeah. Next year, my crystal ball is about as good as anybody else's. I have no idea where the market's going to be. So just to give you an explanation of how this chart works, this green bar is if you put all your money in the stock market as defined by the S&P 500. The blue bars are bonds, the supposedly safe. And I use that in air quotes. And if you decide to go 50-50 because you can't decide whether to put it in the stock market or the bond market, the gray bars. So this chart shows how the markets did going back to 1950. Now these three bars right here are stock, bond, and 50-50 going back to 1950. Basically, they charted all the one-year returns. That's why, if you've got a specific purpose in the next year or two, you put it someplace that ain't going to earn much money usually, and but at the same time, it's not going to lose money. If we go out here to 5 years, it starts to get a little less extreme. Your worst 5-year performance in the stock market is minus 3%. Your best was 28% a year. Bonds still -2 to up 23, and a 50-50 didn't lose money. It always made 1% to 21%. Now, obviously, there's no guarantees on anything. This is just if we use history as a guide. It kind of gives us an idea, but no promises. When you go out to looking at 10-year periods, stock market worst case did down 1% a year for 10 years, up 19. Bonds in the 50-50 portfolio didn't lose at all. If you go out to 20-year rolling period, basically you're invested for 20 years in a row. There was no time period where any of these lost money going back to 1950. Matter of fact, in the stock market, your worst 20 years was 6% on average, and your best was 17%. So the key thing to remember is stock market investing, as we talked about on the outset, is a long-term thing. If you try to make money early, it frequently will put a penalty on you. So how a financial advisor can help. Okay, primary mission of a financial advisor is to help you avoid expensive mistakes. If you're hiring me or anybody else to beat the market on a regular basis, it's a mistake. We won't do it. All we can do is help you avoid making really big mistakes. Since financial advisors have specialized knowledge, they often know the most common mistakes made by investors and how to best avoid them. The advisor will look over your individual situation and help build a plan to increase the chances of retiring in the manner and time of your choosing. The reason to hire a financial advisor is not to beat the market, but to be a guide, helping you navigate to your goals. A good financial advisor will point out potential pitfalls. They'll think of things you will not, and they will just generally help you keep on course. Even though there are commonalities, everyone's path is slightly different, which is why a knowledgeable guide is useful. Okay, so realistic expectations of your financial advisor. Number one, they should disclose to you any charges or any fees before you make a commitment. When I'm sitting down with somebody for the first time, I tell them exactly how I get paid. I say, my wife does not let me work for free. And I give them the courtesy of letting them know up front how I get compensated so they're not wondering. A good financial will ask a lot of questions prior to making any recommendations. If I were to make a recommendation without knowing your financial history, your financial situation, what your goals are, it'd be like going into a doctor saying, I've got a pain in my knee, and the doctor, without taking a blood pressure, looking at your medical history, handing you a pill and charging you for it. Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. A good financial advisor will make you aware of all the pluses and minuses of any recommendation. There's a saying, it's called TANSTAFL, stands for there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. So I will tell you all the pluses and all the minuses of any recommendation, because there will be both. And then you have to determine if they're acceptable. A good financial planner will help you determine your risk tolerance before making recommendations. Some people have a high risk tolerance, others don't. Part of my job is to make sure I invest according to your risk tolerance, which we will determine on an individual basis. And again, I like to emphasize this. Good financial advisor will not be beating the market on a regular basis. And the frequency of communication between client and advisor will depend on the type of a client-advisor relationship. Of course, people are always welcome to call in and ask questions about their accounts and about their situations, and I'll be happy to answer. And that's the final slide. And now, if folks have a question, they can raise their hands and I will call on you and unmute you, and you'll be able to ask whatever questions you want. And keep in mind, the answer might be, I don't know, but I'll find out. So there should be a little icon, and if not, I see everybody on here are good friends of mine. And as a consequence, if for some reason you think of something after the webinar, you can call me, you can email me, and we'll chat about it. If it's more involved, then we might have to set up a phone or Zoom appointment. Well, so far, I don't see any hands going up. I'm going to yammer on for a couple of minutes just to give folks a chance in case they're having a hard time figuring out. I know this took me a little while to figure out. So if you're having a tough time figuring it out, don't feel bad. It whooped me for a little bit. So biggest things, anybody that comes and talks to me, they know what they're getting into before they commit. I say, if you don't understand how I'm compensated, then don't do business with me until you do. Always call me if you have questions. I may not know the answer, but I will find them out. Okay, I'm going to give everybody about another minute. And if nobody raises their hands, then I will stop yammering and let you guys get on with your evenings. It's good to see everybody. And I will appreciate feedback on how I did, good, bad, or indifferent. Okay, I see Vicky Plotsky, and let me just unmute you. I think you are unmuted. Go ahead, Vicky.
Just a quick question. How do you recommend diversifying between international and domestic mutual funds?
I'm sorry. All right. So if I understand correctly, you want to know, how do I recommend between international and domestic mutual funds?
Yes.
Okay. Rule of thumb, where I start, generally speaking, is I start at no more than 25% in international. But depending on how international's been doing and some of the experts I read, I sometimes will decrease that to 10 or 15%. Occasionally, I'll have somebody that says, I don't want to be invested overseas at all, in which case I take it to zero. The one thing I will tell people is I will never recommend something I don't think is at least good. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Good question, by the way. Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for attending. I encourage you to call me if you have any questions. I think everybody on this phone or on this webinar does know they can call me at any time. All right, well, y'all have a good evening. Stay tuned. There'll be more of these next month and the following month. Take care and have a blessed evening.